Hello. Hello. This video is going to be about things I've learned in my 20s as I'm taking into my 30s since I aged yesterday. So, uh, my sister wants me to name it after Prime. I don't know why, my younger sister, but I guess it's because I talk about how, when you reach 25, that's when you reach your physiological prime, and then it's just decay from there. And I personally feel like I never got to reach my prime because I was caught in psychosis and decay very fast. So it's very interesting, but it has me like reflecting on life. So I'm going to, I guess, talk about 10 things, maybe nine things. I don't know if it's 10, but I guess 10 things I've learned from my 20s I'm taking to my 30s. And maybe it'll be interesting to some of you, or maybe useful or whatever. Or maybe you guys can share with me things that you've learned at different, whatever, however you phase your lives, whether in decades or whatever. Anyway, I guess the first thing I start with is something I'm taking with me is like working on meeting other people's realities. Like college opened me up to being able to try on the different sides of me and then seeing how they applied in others. And so I've come to learn that conviction and belief are just as, if not sometimes more important than the strict intellectualism of logical reasoning and commitment to securing premises, as well as holding on to the reliability of intersubjective appraisal and agreement. Kierkegaard taught me to navigate calculated action into a leap in faith. He said leap of faith, but I think it's more a leap in faith, like you're in faith and you're leaping with it. Faith becomes a vehicle which you travel with. So you travel it across an expanse of uncertainty, potential ruin, disappointment, and waste. And these are the main things I tend to struggle with: uncertainty, potential ruin, and disappointment, and waste. And my attempt to bypass ruin, disappointment, and waste made me very indulgent in pleasure and suffering in my uh, late, uh, late teens and early 20s, where I was indulgent in pleasure and suffering. And it ruined my capacity to judge proportion and relevance as far as what I share with others and what I focus on for myself. It also revealed to me my cowardice and lack of resilience and my commitments to others and my ability to hold on to I don't know what to call it, I guess the matrix that holds you together. Like if you think of a matrix in geology, which is like that feature of dirt that holds together different stones, like to make it a conglomerate. So the matrix of my integrity that holds me together, like I saw a lack of resilience in that, and how easy it can be damaged by all sorts of stuff like life events and things that threaten to ruin you and stuff, and how survival kicks in. But for me, I almost learned helplessness instead of survival kicking in to activate me towards striving and security and fighting. Instead of fight and flight, it became uh, decay, stagnate and decay, which was interesting because I always thought I was more of a fighter. But eventually the fighting did kick in, but it became more aggressive. And it's just, I don't know, it just became like I was faced with certain odds that were far from favorable. And I learned that my brute force of will could not overcome them. But right now, I'm glad I've returned to a calm joviality and I've gotten out of my stressed, surrendering aggression towards imperfection and towards my own weaknesses and my inability to make myself how I want to. So these are some of the stuff I've learned. And I learned it by meeting people where they are, learning about all sorts of different people's lives and taking into account more about the different ways people can show up, learning about the variations inherent in how people show up in the world and how people, uh, I guess, live out their lives. And this takes me to my second thing I'm taking with me, which is that life is not linear in every way. It can feel fixed and non-linear in its elements, depending on one's inner state. Like in media and organic living, we receive cues for what feels like progression and relevance. And without those cues, or rather, when we can't register them, Things feel meaningless, they feel stupid, they feel wasteful, disappointing, and dissatisfying. I find as you consider yourself, themes are lived through and returned to over and over again. And phases, backtracks, meanderings and deviations, fragments and intentions, these all solidify into symbols, catalysts, parasites, foundations, models, and promises. Emotions frame importance and competence, where they are allowed to, when they are allowed silences, and and they also allow silences in you too, for peace. And these silences can be in terms of like commas and periods, a stream of activity, as far as how the sentences of the regularities that you observe that make up your daily living that you take for granted or that you may find unfulfilling or dissatisfying, or you may sometimes be like, is this it? Or you may just be like, I need to write something bizarre, write a more creative sentence, or write a sentence that violates meaning or violates grammar, or changes the very symbols or the very sounds that make up the sentence of how a particular situation plays out in your life. It's very interesting. But I do notice that there are substantive soulful moments in this weird Byzantine structure of nonlinearity, linearity, and fixedness, depending on your internal states and all these different things and how you register things. But overall, all the moments interpenetrating, it's hard to keep pace with the broader story without granting some fixed target that reality is for itself, not you. At least this is how I tend to approach things. I tend to be very uninvolved, not so much uninvolved, but I guess non-attached and near detached, where I tend to take a sort of objectifying lens to things, where I try not to center myself as the most important, even though I'm pretty self-absorbed and I can get caught up in my own head and try to consider my own narrative and my own place in the scheme of things and where I'm going, what I'm contributing, and what I'm taking away and stuff like that. So it just keeps things interesting, and it makes it hard to keep pace with a broader story without granting some fixed target that reality is for itself, not for me. That it's not about me. The lesson in Doctor Strange that Doctor Strange learns, and that's why he learns how to like sacrifice himself and keep failing over and over again, contrary to his main existential struggle of like feeling failure and fearing not being able to control things and stuff like that. That's one of the things I relate to. So it's like in those slices and tunneling moments of relevance where you detect things in the peripheral, with peripheral detection and integration into current center of what's important to you, your goals, what you lose, how you feel alienated, the joys you may feel, the pains you may go through, your self-hatred, your awareness, your revelations, things that become revealed to you, and your connections to others, and all these and more, everything I haven't covered. But sometimes there feels to be like a through line, like there feels like a plot for where you have been and where you are going in death and rebirth. Notice I express linear, non-linear, fixed in different measures as the grooves of my mind settle towards turbulence and laminar flow, order and chaos, all interacting. So this is kind of my sense of things. And this takes me to my third thing, as far as, because you can say the previous one I just shared was more about life, my situation, my context, my environment, but this is more about me and the kind of person I've been. And it's that you are easy to fool, so don't be a fool and make things worse. It's very simple. I've played a fool in lust, romance, ambition, and experimentation, but now I have a greater awareness of appropriateness. From this, I tax myself to figure out the wisdom, folly, whim, and development of what I take for granted. And I keep developing my judgment for discerning, evaluating, calculating, and categorizing. All of this with a sense of their nature and their limits. So I can make choice from sense. And this process has taught me the place of emotion and how it underlies in subtle ways all that I do. And how, like, if you don't pay attention to these natures and these limits and get a sense of appropriateness, how if you don't pay attention to how emotions guide you, how they inspire you, what emotions are shaping up your values to like drive you forward or drive you towards things or drive you away from things, or drive you in yourself, in relation to yourself, how you coordinate and manage yourself, how you try to dampen or enhance, how you try to negate or affirm, how you try to ignore or try to attach and hold on to firmly to things, and it tends to make you act very foolish. So these are some of the things I've learned. And the fourth thing I've learned and I'm taking with me is faith. That is trust and resilience of being faithful are preservers of sanity. What I've learned is all hope risks despair. Every breath purchases a piece of death. So I've learned to give things up, but I haven't lost my fear of meaninglessness and hurting others, even though I try on understandings that make this inevitable. And I try on, I guess, interactions and engagements that make it inevitable that I'm bound to hurt someone in some way, or I'm bound to like come up against meaninglessness, like such as creating a forest fire in the forest of my sense of meaning and my sense of flourishing, or in my sense of fruitfulness and progress and accomplishment, which leaves things barren and empty. And despite me wanting to avoid those things, sometimes they're necessary as a course of new growth. And so I think these are good fears, and faith has taught me a place for them. They have steered me on track when I paid attention to them and acknowledged them as the shapers, the kind of person I want to be. I refuse to be killed, but I am willing to die. And if needed, then I am willing to kill. So these are things I'm setting myself up for, setting myself up in terms of orient, in terms of how to be towards the world and making tough choices. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to go into the military or wanted to live in nature, because I wanted to like be put at the edge of things and be transformed as a result and discover how I take to things when survival is primary, or when I have to depend on myself or depend on others or work with others to bring about a certain goal. These things all try you and all develop you in certain ways. They're like conditions for, they're like sun, soil, and water for the plant that you are to grow. That's kind of how I see it. So, but I do believe we matter, but it's an expansion and contraction thing, and inhaling to be exhaled by the world. I matter as a horizon, but I matter less as the sequence progresses towards the past and future and scales towards what makes me up and what I'm embedded in. I take it that we are among stardust till our bodies become earth dust. And I also find it interesting that when you zoom in, you engage for action, but when you zoom out, you are acted out for engagement with the wider scene. You tune out to consider your focus choices. So you get a greater sense of there's more to things than just your locale. There's more to things than just yourself, than just your family. And you kind of find your locale, your family, your life becomes like an eye that you see the vaster things, other families, other locales, other lives through, to try to take care of them, to try to do good for. At least that's how I see it. So it's like you find a universal through the particular, you find the whole through the part. By tunneling into the whole, you find the part, and by tunneling into the part, you find the whole. It's like an Ouroboros, like a snake eating its own tail. So these things end up contributing to each other and reinforcing each other and sustaining each other. And this leads me to my next thing that I'm taking with me is that number 5, the mystery of life unravels each life as a riddle before it clarifies the supremacy. This is where the objective world, an existential constitution, meek like software and electrical signals. Say, I take to Jesus, the human absolute, as the electrical signal, but the software that uses and interfaces is akin to the relation between parents and children. Parents come to look at themselves through their children's eyes. So God, being the ultimate parent, wants to be seen by us. He's looking at himself through us, but he wants to be seen by us accurately so he can look at himself as he is. There's a sort of congruency that he seeks between self and other, between creator and creation. So this creates harmony, creates a a through line across all levels, across all domains, where the absolute and the particular unite and reinforce each other, like what I just said previously. So that's kind of how I take it. That's what I'm coming to understand. I may be wrong. I don't know. I'll figure it out. Or maybe I won't figure it out. It'll just be an interesting idea. Who knows? But I've been struggling with how to see God as far as my life goes. And I can't default to agnosticism and, and atheism because that's kind of how I've been intellectually, where existentially I'm theistic. Existentially, I arrange myself towards God. But intellectually, I'm agnostic, where I let alternatives present themselves. I consider alternatives. I consider uncertainties, limits. I almost want to give up and just go with go with what's most immediate. Go with uh I guess what feels most reliable in a tangible sense, or rather manipulable, what you can manipulate, what you can control, what you can interface with and get direct results from. I'm just going to go with that instead of trusting myself to something that I'm contextualized in instead of it being contextualized in me. Something that feels like a context for my contexts instead of it just being my context, if you get what I'm saying. So I right now pursue the rigorous intimacy of prayer, trial, error, correction, and more error while waiting for him to show himself to be who he claims. Not in previous and current lives, but my own. And that's what I'm currently after right now at this phase in my development. And this leads me to my next one, number 6, and that it's never too late to change with effort and situations and conditions. And that's why I've gone through lots of changes. And I try to sort of like take the face of each change with me to the next one. I take the priority or the characterizing, I don't know what to call it. I had an example, but I lost it. I can't think of it right now. Oh, well, I may think of it later. Maybe I may get back to it. Maybe if it's in a book or something I watch, I don't remember. But the sense of like, I take, I try to keep integrated all the aberrations, the deviations, I mean, all the negations, all the affirmations, all the different commitments, all the losses, the absences and the presences of things. I try to like take them into account and factor them into who I am now. And I guess sometimes a part of me is trying to make a coherent story, or at least a coherent map, like a map of the territory that I've lived, the territory I've explored so far. So that's one of those things. So that's where the situatedness and conditions comes from. All while I change with my effort, with effort too. Because even though I accept that Jesus is going to change me and make me more like him, I have to like do my part, which takes me to the next thing I'm going with, number 7, which is make mistakes faster and keep moving forward. You can always refine as long as you have leisure. So, uh, on this is it's very self-explanatory. In fact, I think it was my second video, which was basically about this, about when I first started making videos and how I was like bothered by the fact I kept messing up. I would stutter, I would lose things, I'd have to pause, I'd have to like turn inward, all because I don't have a fully functioning mind because of my psychosis. So, but I've gotten past that. I look at it and I'm just like, wow, what a contrast. I've changed so much. I feel like I've actually accomplished something. I've overcome certain things. And now I'm okay with imperfection. I'm okay with making mistakes. Sometimes a bit too okay because I make very rough videos. I don't prepare. I don't take notes. Or even when I do take notes, I improvise too much because it's just like a general outline. So it might not be appealing to some people who want a more neater format or a more neater way of expressing, a more neater way of getting things across. Anyway, I guess I'll go on to my next one since I've said everything I can about what I just said. Uh, Number 8, when you can be thankful and put a frame to see what you take for granted about yourself, others, in the world. And this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm at a stage where I'm very grateful. So yeah, I'll go on to the next one. Number nine. No matter how settled you feel in the moment, you are a wanderer, a nomad. So keep learning and adapting for change. Since there's a feature of unpredictability, sometimes you have to make it up as you go. Even if it's a gamble without a clear criteria or a clear reference. You only have a memory and a wish. And this gamble costs everything. You can lose everything. And that's kind of how your whole life can play out when you set a course for orienting or situating yourself in some manner of living as unfolding as some particular matrix. So these are things I come to accept. And this is very trying, this is very relevant to our times because I think I was listening to, I don't remember who I was listening to. Like there are different people who said this, how like this is one of the first times in a human region of progress or interaction where we can't predict how the world is going to look even 10 years from now and how it could be radically different from anything we've ever known. So we can't predict it to adapt to it or prepare for it. We just kind of have to like wait for it to arrive and then situate ourselves into it. So I've been thinking that my approach to things of sort of being a wanderer and a nomad, maybe what we have to take to where we have to become generalists and quick adapters to things instead of having sort of like a fixed, stable life. So I don't know. Maybe more things will clarify in the future, especially as I get more involved with technology and stuff like that in my major and get more involved with the world in the future. So I'll see. Uh, but yeah, and I think my last one, number 10, will be something about love. And it's that all types of love, um, their absence and their presence are what grows and decays things about us for better or for worse. So one love to me felt impermanent and at times a snare that keeps me living to benefit and not hurt others. I despaired at life and I wanted to break my bonds. I wanted to free myself from the social trappings, especially since people can be very disappointing and very, I don't know what to call it. I guess there are different ways people can be in the negative. They can take from you, they can ignore you, they can't control you, they can cost you and stuff. And I didn't want to be a part of that. But I realized that these very things, they lie in with even the good things too with people. So I come to accept that it's our fickleness with love, not love as a constellation of states and as an execution of our convictions, will, and hopes. That is the issue. So I'm working on cultivating and enduring love. Um, Maybe if I get married and have kids, I'll get like the principles or the resources that I've acquired and learned from those encounters, that interface with things. But for now, my family and friends are enough. And I'm deeply grateful, though it's a depth I cannot feel that well anymore. I can only allow it to animate me, which is very interesting how like I've come to note that there are different ways you can sort of be settled as yourself, different ways you can encounter yourself. Maybe I'll make a video about it in the future. Maybe I'll just end it here. So I'll talk about it next time. But thanks for listening. I hope you take something from this. This is what I've learned from my 20s. There's way more, of course, but I had to like select a few, like what are the most important ones to me right now. So it was like a retroactive selection. It wasn't like a selection of things I was going through in my 20s and stuff. There's just more like who I am right now. This is what's relevant to me right now, which is kind of how things sometimes work, where your past reorganizes, your present reorganizes your past and almost changes the progression of revelations and themes and the plot of how your life was and makes it something new for itself going into the future. So that's what's going on with me right now. But thanks for listening. Enjoy. Bye bye.